2. Dawn's already here.
Woohoo! Hello, Don.
What's up, Don?
Good morning. Welcome. I hope the weather in Florida is better than it is here.
Yeah, it snowed yesterday.
No, we woke up with snow ice pellets on the tip.
With this much snow.
Yeah.
I had
This
dinner with
much
ice
snow.
pellets.
I think it hailed yesterday afternoon as
It
well,
did.
briefly.
It did. Not good. So, whatever.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Anyway.
Yeah, what's new with everybody?
What's new with you? I heard you worked with the junior high kids.
I did.
And you loved every minute of it.
I loved it so much. Their youthful energy
You loved
was
it
an
so much,
inspiration to me.
You want to marry it?
No.
But you did get a reward
'Cause we could arrange that.
afterwards.
We do?
Cake?
Oh, we do, yeah, because we went over to Jill's house.
Yeah. An ice cream
Chills.
cake.
Mercy.
Sorry.
No, she-
Just kidding.
she's that voice off camera that
Yeah.
makes, like every late night show has one of those.
Are our mics on?
Yeah, Dawn says you can keep the snow.
Thank you, Don. We will.
Brent's here.
Brent's here.
Oh, good.
What's up, Brent?
Hey, all
Good,
right.
because we're going to be talking about pastors today, and he needs to listen up.
Yeah.
Plus, I stole some of his favorite phrases with pastors. So.
Don says it's about 90 there today.
Okay, you know what? I'd rather have what we have then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
90's a bit much.
Yeah. You can have it, Don. Plus, you can keep that humidity on top of that 90-degree.
Oh, yeah. I went to
Craziness.
Florida years ago on a business trip to Jacksonville, Florida.
Yeah.
And it was so humid that every time I walked outside, my glasses just fogged up, like bad.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
Yeah.
Absolutely miserable.
I don't know how people do it, dude.
Yeah, I couldn't.
So, like Andrew and Rebecca Walls years ago when they moved back to Oklahoma, eastern side of Oklahoma, I drove their U-Haul truck out. And so I got out there and we unloaded the U-Haul truck and I was dying. Like I felt like I was going to die. And I was young and healthy
Yeah.
and, all that good stuff. So I go in, take a shower, did not feel like I took a shower. Like
Right.
the towel did nothing, turning the water off in the shower did nothing. It just felt weird.
Yeah.
And I told him, get me to the airport, dude. And so he did. He, took me to the airport where I sat next to the swamp cooler until my flight. It was miserable.
Yeah.
It's like, you guys can have this. You can't pay me enough. No wonder houses are so cheap back there.
Right.
To give them away. Anyhow.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry, Don.
I hope you're enjoying it, Don.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Welcome.
Marcy,
What a bunch of jerks.
Marcy and I are technically Floridians. You know that.
You know
We
what?
went to Pensacola once.
Well, you didn't create the weather there.
That's
So
the
don't
term.
take it personal.
Floridian.
Floridians. Yep. Technically. Our licenses.
Do you miss
Wow.
it?
Floridians.
As far as the government's concerned, no Floridian.
That made me think of my Star Wars nerd. The midichlorians is what makes it Jedi.
Midichlorians,
right? So
yeah.
you got Floridians in your system.
I don't believe in midichlorians, so I'm a Christian.
All right.
I don't even know what that is.
It's
I'm just
Star
in the
Wars
dark over here,
theology.
staring off
Star Wars
into the
theology.
distance.
Do we have any announcements?
Yeah,
So that's why the Lord made air conditioning, Don says.
there you go.
The Lord
Just got to
made
stay
it?
next to it.
Jesus
You
invented
just can't leave it.
I think it was actually a guy named Carrier that made air conditioning.
Huh.
No, someone told us about the tundra.
Oh my God.
There's a natural air conditioning, which God made.
Straight up tundra, dude.
Called the tundra. Anyhow,
people,
what are we
people
doing?
are starting to tune out now.
We're losing watchers.
Brent's
Yeah.
gone. He's like, I'm embarrassed. I'm a pastor at this church with these
Right.
guys. Tonight is what's for dinner tonight anyway? For the
Dude,
dudes.
it's third Thursday?
Yes.
It's Third Thursday.
I think it's ribs. Well, last month they decided ribs, and John Brandon was going to do ribs, but John's sick, so I don't know if there's still a plan.
You
for
mean they were
ribs.
actually gonna bring a barbecue and
Yeah.
barbecue them here?
Yeah.
Oh man, that would be good.
But John's down for the count right now, so I don't know how that affects the ribs for tonight.
Should I go check the fridge and see what's in there?
I better make a little
We
note.
got goldfish.
But it's going to be something good, probably.
It'll be something.
Yeah.
Something.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
Despite what I said
There are
in
some
front of the
people-
church
yeah.
on Sunday,
It's-
where I said 6:30, and
6
then
o'clock.
Brent had to text me and tell me it was 6.
6 o'clock. That's all I have for an announcement.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else either.
Okay.
All right.
Well, there you go. What are we doing?
All right, we're continuing our series on the church.
Let me say this too.
Go ahead.
If you guys have any like topics or anything like that you would like specifically spoken to by the pastors, shoot them to us. And we'll do a table talk on it.
I want to do.
Jordan will do a table talk on it.
No, yeah, because I'll ask the questions and you guys can answer them. I want to do like a random questions series where because I've come up with some real doozies.
Like
Yeah.
what?
What if you did a series
I'm
by
not gonna
yourself
run
and you
them.
asked and
They're
answered
difficult.
random questions?
These are difficult questions. And I was like, I should just do Jordan's random questions episode.
Yeah,
Good.
But
do it.
I don't know. A lot of them we disagree on and it wouldn't be helpful.
Well, that's why you do it by yourself.
Yeah.
Ask and answer.
That's why it's
I'll
called
disagree
Jordan's
with myself.
questions.
And you guys just sit there like Indian style on the floor?
Yeah,
or
you
what?
come and ask the questions and then answer
Yeah.
yourself, and we'll just.
We'd go to Brent's house and tune in and watch.
That's right.
That's what we would do.
No, I want to go to Brent's house.
Yeah, no, we've said that before about topics, and nobody ever sends us a topic. So.
Never.
It's like, send us a topic.
So we're saying it again.
Yeah.
If there's anything you're curious about, anything you've ever thought about that's just weird or just that's hard to reconcile, or just something you're interested in, something that you want to hear talked about by the pastors, send us.
Yeah, what's
Send
the
it to
age of accountability? Does it exist?
That was random.
Yeah, that's what I said. Random questions.
Yeah.
What really happened in Genesis 6?
Is Jonah literal?
Did Jonah die in the fish,
Yeah.
or was he alive in the fish?
What's up with the Gospel of Mark?
What?
Which gospel do you like best?
What's
Can
up
ask
with
Jordan that.
Jesus' brothers and sisters? Did they get special powers?
People are starting to tune out again.
Yeah,
Yeah. Send in your
Yes.
questions.
Mission accomplished.
Someone's just Googling like the weirdest question. Okay. All right. Today we're going to talk about pastors/elders. Yeah, we talked before about kind of a plurality of elder model here at the door. Which, by the way, I've been seeing a lot of articles about lately. I don't know if you follow any of the
Gospel
article people.
Coalition?
Yeah.
That was funny when you said that, when you sent this yesterday and said, I think I want to talk about this.
Yeah.
Because I just read like 3 or 4 from Gospel Coalition the day before.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And they were frustrating. We'll probably end up getting to why.
Well, I don't want to get into plurality too much, but
Yeah, you
most
do.
people, when they say it, they don't think of like all on one level. They think there's still one dude who's like up here. And in the articles I read, they all did that. And it was
Exactly.
like, well, then you just totally neutered.
They're
if you
actually
will.
arguing against it
Yeah.
while protecting it.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, we're just going to talk today about kind of what a pastor elder is, what their job is, what the calling is, how someone becomes that, the biblical qualifications, and a little bit more. I got some bonus questions at the end if we have time.
Bonus.
Are they random bonus questions?
No, they're pretty on point.
All right.
All right. So let's talk a little bit. First off, what's the difference between a pastor and an elder, and how do you know that?
Pastors are paid and elders aren't? Is that
A pastor's rad and an elder isn't.
varsity, junior varsity?
A pastor wears sunglasses, and an elder has gray hair.
I mean,
Yes.
I think the answer to that question, it might depend on kind of what denominational flavor you are. Like, people might answer that differently, right? So, I mean, I think we would have a conviction that the Bible answers it one way, but kind of different denominations might view it differently.
Okay, so yeah, the church I grew up in, they had a pastor and an elder board, which was really like, in some churches they have kind of the responsibility of sort of rubber stamping what the pastor says. In other churches, they're sort of like even above the pastor. But so some churches do view it as two separate things. What about at the door here,
I think we
or
would-
in the New Testament?
or in
Yeah.
the Bible.
Yeah, the door of the Bible, we agree that the pastor and elder, that's an interchangeable term, that it's the same thing.
How do we know that? Like, how do we know that?
Well, because of the way that they're actually used, first of all, in the Bible, but also because of the words that are used. So they're synonymous words, they're interchangeable. So when you have overseer, when you have elder, when you have
Bishop, maybe.
yes, thank you,
Yeah.
bishop, like and pastor, like these are all used in the same ways with the same words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Brent one time, actually many times I've heard him. Hi, Brent. He talks about the 3 C's of being a pastor or whatever.
Do you think he's saying them right now?
Well,
He probably is. Which there may be 4, but I remember 3, Brent. So if there's 4, I'm sorry.
Drop it in the chat if we missed
Yeah,
one.
he talks about calling, qualifications, and cohesion. So we're going to kind of walk through the 3 of those today and talk about a little bit about what those mean. So, what do we mean by calling? Like calling to be a pastor? People, will say, "I feel called to do this" or "called to do that."
I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
What's the problem?
Who's doing the calling?
Okay,
Can we say that? Can we start there?
Yeah.
sure.
Right? Because there's a lot of people that see themselves a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not necessarily accurate. And then when they see themselves a certain way, they actually aspire to be that, and it doesn't necessarily mean they should. This is
Okay.
part of the reason why we have a lot of people in pulpits and churches across the world that shouldn't probably be in those
Right.
positions, is because they put themselves there. So who's the appointment? Who's recognizing the calling and then appointing the calling? It's always safe if it's godly people around us that know us that are doing the appointing, or people that are over us, particularly other
Mm-hmm.
elders, rather than us going, I think I want to do this.
Right.
And this is even done at the most base level, right? Because I think we already talked about this before, but how do we, if we decide I want to be a pastor, I feel like I'm called to be a pastor and pastor a church, what's step 1? All we have to do is go to a seminary. We don't need anybody to sign that off. We don't need anybody to agree with that. We then pick our school.
Yeah.
We put out our money. We get our education. We get our piece of paper. We candidate for a job, and then we work ourselves up to that position. So anybody literally can appoint themselves, and it's happening all the time.
Right.
But when you have other godly men around you that are that know your life, that are looking at your life, and that are walking through your life with you, they're going to see much better than we can, much clearer than we can, what God has put into us, what our strengths are, and like they're going to be able to determine our calling. So I just had this conversation the other day with somebody who asked me, like, I forget who it was, how'd you become a pastor?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you like what you do? Or so, like, it was a couple of questions, and it was like, I never wanted to be one. I literally didn't. Like, even as I started growing as a Christian in the church, that was never something that I aspired to or wanted to be. It was when a lot of people around me, godly people who knew me well, started to say the same thing about my strengths, is when I started paying attention to it. And that's the way I think it.
My story is very similar to that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
It's not something I wanted to do, and it was other people outside of me saying, maybe God's called you to this.
Yeah. Yep.
So we see kind of like it's
And
good
we
to
see that, by the way,
differentiate between.
1 Timothy. Sorry.
Yeah.
Timothy.
Well, we're going to go to all of this.
Okay.
It's good to differentiate between an internal calling and an external calling.
Yeah.
So internal calling would be kind of what you're talking about, where I feel or whatever, I sense whatever, a calling from God to do ministry,
Yeah.
which is sort of suspect because we're broken people. We allow sometimes other ideas to enter our head. It may be something from God. It may not be. It may have some other motivation or something like that.
That's the thing.
So
It could be a
does say
desire.
in 1 Timothy. It does say like whoever desires,
Exactly.
It's
to
a
be an
noble
overseer.
aspiration.
It's a noble aspiration. So like it's certainly not wrong, and God does work through our internal
Right.
calling. Sometimes it comes after the external
Right.
calling, where other people are kind of giving us that feedback and
Right.
placing that
Sure.
on us, which would be kind of the external calling, where it's verified and noticed and called out by other people of God around you.
Right.
So it becomes affirmed by people outside of you.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I think of like, and I just see that as like so much more safe, you know, because like I know how my brain, I can think different things, or, how often do I think something's right or feel some sort of way, and it's maybe some motivation that is not really from God, is just something, I want,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So I'm always kind of nervous about that, but
Well, if the heart's deceitfully wicked,
Yeah.
and we don't know it well,
yeah.
how are we verifying that what we're feeling at any given
Right.
time is of God or us? And it's not from us. It has to be by letting other people in on it that know us
Yeah.
to do the verifying.
Yeah.
A couple of things come to mind. I remember several years ago I was in church with a guy who, he had this kind of unction in him or aspiration to be a pastor. And
Unction, good word.
yeah, I try to use good words just
It's
for
a
you
good
guys
one.
now, right?
Yeah.
He was bequeathed the unction of his tundra. Anyway,
Sorry.
he had this. He aspired to be pastor, and he was a great guy. Believe that he loved the Lord, but nobody in his life would affirm that he was fit to be a pastor. Not in a negative way. It's like that's just not what you're called to do, kind of a thing. He was very evangelical. Like he was always sharing Christ with people, kind of a thing. But nobody in his life, would affirm that he was called to be a pastor, and he just was so convinced that that's what God had called him to do.
Right.
Then he went out and tried to do it, and it kind of failed on him because it just wasn't fit. And then earlier this week, I had a conversation with a guy, not necessarily about being a pastor, but a guy who was just wanting to get advice for this idea that he had in ministry. And he's like, I want to come under the leadership of the church and want to know what you guys think, rather than saying here's this opportunity and God's called me to this. He's like, what do you think? And I want your feedback. And it was just really refreshing that someone who kind of felt called to something is looking for kind of feedback outside of him.
For sure.
And
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that example that's set by that guy, because if you feel that calling, God can affirm it through other people. Like God is sovereign and is powerful. Like I remember there was a time when I was really young where I felt that calling, and people had told me oh, you have this gifting, you have this ability. I think this is for you and stuff. But I remember I was leaving home and I actually went to school, which maybe we'll talk about a little bit later. But I went to school for this, and I remember thinking, what if my professors don't see that, or what if I was kind of nervous about it. What if my calling's not confirmed by these people? Which is just kind of a weird thought. But God is powerful enough to bring that to you. Part of it is being somewhere where you're known, which is almost if there's a first step, I feel this calling, are you known? Are you in a community of faith of people where you're using your gifts and someone could, call this out in your life, or not?
Yeah.
So, because how many people have I met who want to be a pastor, who talk about that? I'll use a funny example because this person will never see this, but I remember one time someone came to Lapine and they were it was someone who is a regular there brought their friend. And it was actually a friend of a friend. And I was talking to the guy, and he was like, oh, are you a pastor here? And before I could be no, I'm not really a pastor or whatever, the friend was like, yeah, that's Pastor Jordan. And then he goes, oh, cool, I want to do what you do. I've been meaning to get into ministry. And I was like, well, where do you go to church?
It's on my bucket list.
Yeah, he's like, I want to do, I'm I need to do that. I've been meaning to do that. And I was like, well, where do you go to church? And he was like, oh, we don't really go to church. And I was just like, okay, come to church.
It's overrated.
It was kind of funny, but I don't know. There's something in that.
Yeah. Well, even the desire thing, I mean, going back a few steps, Timothy makes that comment. He who desires the office of overseer desires a noble thing or a good thing. Timothy's not saying if you have a desire to do it, that you should. That's not the statement he's making.
Right.
There's a lot of people who desire to do it, to your point,
Yeah.
right there, that just shouldn't. There's no reason for you to.
Yeah.
So just because you have a desire to do something doesn't mean that you should.
I saw the other day, we have a friend who you guys know, put a post on Facebook, something about if you want to be a pastor but you can be happy doing something else, do that thing. It just was kind of an interesting post. A friend of ours who just has had a rough go.
I need to go back to doing
I can be
rough
happy
go
in
as a
Mexico.
pastor, has experienced some hard things, and anyway, it just was an interesting post. That
It's going to go back to eating tacos.
We're
in
let's
Mexico.
get out of here. Should we call it a day?
Go back to chimneys.
Sorry to stomp on your point.
No, not at all. Just was a thought-provoking post
Yeah.
for me. Just kind of knowing the history of this friend.
Yeah.
It provoked my thoughts.
Yeah. So where does calling come from? I think we've already answered this.
Yeah, I'd say
But I think it's still worth
it comes from God, sometimes internally, but I think importantly, crucially, externally as well.
Yeah.
So it comes, I think, from the congregation, really. God speaks through the congregation.
Well, I think it has to be both, because if if you have an internal calling but no external affirmation, well, that's not good. But if you have kind of like a church calling someone to be a pastor in their midst, and that person's like, I don't want to do it, that's kind of a recipe for disaster.
Did
as
you ever
well.
feel like you didn't want to be a pastor, but people were telling you should be a pastor?
Until I did want to be, yeah.
But
I mean,
it
for
can
me,
develop
it
over
was one of
time.
those things that it just wasn't on my radar, right? I
Yeah.
had other plans in life, and my story, like there was just a day where like a switch flipped, and all of a sudden, like in an instant, it's like, wow, God's called me to be a pastor.
I think
And,
more what
and
it,
I embraced it, and not because like just God opened my eyes to that, and it became a thing that then was on my radar and very much embraced.
I think more what I'm getting at is where does your calling come from? Because we can all learn, we can all go and learn our Bibles, and we can learn how to be more hospitable and how to be more relational and how to be better leader. We can go and learn things. There's things that we can initiate and learn in the world. But is a calling something we learn, or is it something that's given to us?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for the clarity.
I would say, like, for me, it's coming face to face with what God has done for me in Christ, and in a way that like it's hard to walk away from ever. And like for me, that expresses itself. My faith in the good news, my faith in Christ expresses itself in the desire, more than like a desire, the calling to share that with other people, to share what I've learned, in a way that like it's difficult to walk away from and
Sure.
not do.
Sure. Because I mean, I think about it like what makes us what we are, and when you look at like 1 Corinthians 12, chapter 12, chapter 14, when you look at the body, it's God through that entire language, through that entire narrative that Paul says is initiating, who makes
Right.
a leg and an arm, and that's I think what I'm getting at
Okay.
is that the actual calling that we have to do what it is that we're designed to do by God is only given by God. So
Sure.
once we are able to discover that and identify that, we're obviously able to grow in that, right? And we're able to take steps to grow in that. But the actual calling, I think, is something that's completely outside of us. I, of course, think
Yeah.
of the disciples. You know, these are normal dudes that have zero education as far as what it was that they would end up doing. Jesus was the difference maker. Jesus knew he was the difference maker. He came to them and made them what they were. Otherwise, they wouldn't be it. And I think, yes, they were apostles, but I think we see that same idea throughout the Bible whenever it talks about members of the body and gifting and
Sure.
calling. You know, is that it's something that we can't just go and learn or pay for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
Marcy, is the Wi-Fi on the computer? Can you turn it off and make sure the Ethernet's connected? I got a text saying the video's choppy.
The Ethernet is choppy.
Alright, so we're still live?
Yeah.
Still
Okay,
rolling.
hopefully that helps it.
Yeah, we got 2 thumbs up, so.
Alright.
Heck yeah, we do.
How is the
One of them's
pastoral how is the pastoral calling different from the calling to like be a worship leader or be a parent or home group leader or something like that?
That's a good question.
Thank you.
I mean, immediately I think
We're gonna
of.
go to 1 Timothy, so just don't get crazy.
You
here.
need to.
I was thinking
Dude, don't tell me.
Ephesians 4 is where I was
Close your
thinking.
Bible.
I was thinking Ephesians 4 before you
Yeah.
said 1 Timothy, but like God has given to the church, the office of pastor, pastor, elder. Not that God doesn't give other things to the church,
No.
like that's called out in the Bible. The gift of a worship leader isn't necessarily called out in the Bible.
Yeah, it seems to be a unique sort of office given to the church,
Yeah.
given by God to the church. Also, there's qualifications for it. You know?
Yeah, there's not only that; it's a scary, extensive list
Let's read it.
of qualifications.
Let's read it and then feel good.
And then leave the ministry.
First Timothy 3. Chad's got his coffee in one hand. So
I'm trying not to spill coffee on my Bible,
all right.
which I've done before.
1 Timothy 3, let's see, 1 to 7. Says here, this saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-control, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own household well, with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if anyone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, so that he may not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil. Let's just roll through some of these here.
Let's not.
What does it mean to be above reproach?
Means that you need to be perfect. You need to be
Just kind of
sinless.
float around.
Right, have a halo over your head. That was sarcastic, by
Yes.
the way.
I know this is read a few different ways, but
Yeah.
I believe that everything else that follows on this letter after reproach
Is
is
what
what
that
it
means.
is to be
Yeah.
above reproach. So, but basically, there's nothing glaring in your life, just character-wise, leader-wise, even in a godly sense. There's nothing glaring. Doesn't mean you're perfect, but it means that you don't have these things sticking out to where it's always tripping people up that you're trying to lead.
Or it becomes a distraction from
Yep.
the message,
Yep,
essentially. Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's kind of a general thing. The husband of one wife. What is it?
Are you
Should we get into
serious,
this
dude?
one?
Are
We're
you
gonna
Should
go
we get
there?
into this
Are you
one?
even serious,
Well,
bro?
now you threw it out there, we kind of have
Does
to.
that mean I can't have two wives?
It's one at a time. So just
So
once a
at
month,
time?
one, one for each month. I think Solomon did that for a
Oh
while.
my gosh.
No. Do you really want to get into this?
I don't, not anymore. I think that's pretty.
This has been
pretty obvious.
extremely controversial
Yes.
since it was written.
Controversial because some people are worried that if they were divorced
Yes.
or even a widower or whatever, that they couldn't,
Yes.
that they were disqualified by that.
So the strong view would be that you were married once to one woman and never another.
Yeah, even if you were
Once
a
for all time.
believer at the time.
Once for all time is what some believe. That's the strong
I like
view.
it. One at a time. I might use that.
Yeah.
One
In the
at a
future.
time.
Well, that's kind of the other view.
Right. Like a one-woman man is kind of a literal translation of that.
That exactly. And so,
So you're committed to the one you're with.
yes, that's the most popular view.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you really think it could be one, and then if they die, you don't remarry? Is that
The dying
There
one
are-
is usually not the point. The point
Yeah.
usually is either whether you're a believer or not, maybe you were divorced and now you're on your second wife
Right.
or whatever.
yeah.
So some would say the very strong view
Yeah.
would be that that would disqualify you from ministry,
Yeah.
even if you weren't a believer or you were or whatever. That because you're remarried, you're just God can't use
Yeah.
you for this. But
So
that's
yeah.
not my view.
So the strong view of it is that you were married once to one woman, and no matter what went down or what the circumstances are, that's it. But there's a softer view. There's a view that agrees with that, but has exceptions. So if that person was a non-believer and they left you, you're free, like Jesus says, to marry. Or if you're widowed, if that person died on you, you're free also to marry again. So, and then there's people who just think, it's fine that you were married before and were divorced. It's that you're fully committed to the one you're married to now, like Chad said. And that one can get weird, but that's the most popular view, I think.
yeah.
It's the easiest pill to swallow.
Yeah, it makes us all feel better.
Right.
Right? Especially with the day and age. And I guess I do want to point that out is when we read a verse like that, it has a different connotation than when they read a verse
Right.
like that. Divorce was not rampant in the church at that time. In our culture, in the church, it's normal. It's just normal. So we don't even read this right. All right,
Agreed.
that's all I'm going to say about it.
All right.
Did we solve it? No,
Yep.
we didn't.
Sober,
I confuse people even more.
sober-minded. What do you guys think that
I just
means?
preached on this Sunday. It's my
Did
whole
you?
text. Yeah, and I'm going to
Yeah.
preach on it again this Sunday.
Cool.
Actually, it follows with self-control too, doesn't it?
Yep.
I
Yeah.
preached on
We'll
both
get a
those
twofer
things.
there.
Yep, got a
So if you want the answer to that one, come to church on Sunday.
That's right. Stop going to the pot shop. Put your liquor away. What else? Stop huffing paint.
Stop
No one does that
dropping
anymore, do they?
acid.
Is that a thing
Stop,
still?
Stop eating the mushrooms. No.
I thought they were regular mushrooms.
Sober-minded means to have a clear mind. It means that you have clear thought. So you don't. Have you ever met these people that are just all over the place, almost from day to day, week to week? They're kind of extreme in their thinking, and they're jumping all over the place. I think it's Jude that talks about people being actually, it's James that talks about people being blown around by every wind, and that could be true emotionally, and also as far as our state of mind, where we're just blown around continually, and we're not stable or clear or level. That's all it means.
Yeah,
That's
I think of people, or even myself sometimes, who like watching the news, how you can like sort of panic about
Yeah.
things and just get kind of worked up over things that are
Right.
maybe real, maybe not, maybe within my control to do anything about, maybe not at all in my control to do anything about, and just kind of this, like, are you grounded in the Lord? Are you
Yes.
grounded in God's sovereignty and
Yeah.
His Word? Are you sober-minded? Are you useful to other people because you're present?
Yes.
Or are you just like,
Yes.
this? And I think, I don't know, my heart goes out to people who are kind of, even without any substances,
Yeah.
are just sort of all over the place, because that's a tough way to live, man.
Sure.
And a pastor has to be like infinitely
Yeah.
sober-minded, because we're dealing with a lot of relationships, like everything social that we're doing,
Yeah.
and so it goes like this. I mean, take our word for it. From week to week, at one week we can be on a high in ministry because things are just so awesome, and then the next week we can be like in a ditch
Right.
because things are so just despairing.
How did we get here?
And if that dictates our thinking and our leading, there's a problem. There's gonna be a bigger problem than that in the church. And so a pastor has to be able to stay clear-headed through the ups and the downs of what comes at him every week. So it matters greatly that
Yeah,
someone's
That's
stable.
good.
I think a lot of ministry is grounding people in God's Word and God's promises and who He is. And if we're not like that ourselves, that becomes really difficult.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And like you said, even the headlines, even what's going on in the world around us, like, is changing every week. And if pastors just relying on that to, bring sermons and teach,
Dude.
then
That's a good point, man.
Yeah.
I've seen pastors where
That
like
happens a lot.
they're like all their like illustrations or what they're preaching to is like what they read in the news that week,
Yep.
which like that is not good. Like, cause some of that like isn't really real in the sense that like that's not. If you read the news, it was like it'd be like I don't know. Let's use Mexico. It's like the news you'd read about Mexico does not give you a good picture of what Mexico's like being there. In the same way, if someone was overseas reading about America, they'd be like, man, this is like a total disaster. But like, that doesn't really give us a clear view of what our lives are like. But man, there are a lot of pastors who just sort of like will rail against things they saw in the news, and it's
Right.
always like sort of hyperbole.
Yeah.
I don't know.
and the pastor's the teacher's primary job is to hold the line of what's transcendent beyond all those things.
Yep.
Yes.
And so we actually need to do the opposite of that. We actually need to hold the line even when things are chaotic around us
Right.
in the world. And we need to train our people to hold that line. We actually need to retrain their thinking after they come in from a week of looking at headlines and being completely absorbed in these things.
Yeah.
Yep.
We need to say, oh, here's still where we're at. Here's
Right.
still who Christ is. Here's still what Christ wants
Right.
from us. Here's still how we should
Even
be
in
thinking.
spite of all the chaos and horrible things, God is real.
Yeah.
And here's who He is and what He's done.
Yep.
Yeah, I think during COVID, especially in the last year, just being around you guys, being able to do that for each other, do
Yeah.
that for me, has been like such an amazing help. Just to reground me and remind me of what's important and what's transcendent and what's actually, of value.
Yeah.
Yep.
Why? Oh, because we have a plurality of co-equal pastors.
Amen. That's a different episode, though. Respectable. Honorable.
Why'd you look at me like that when you said that, dude? You like lifted your eyes and looked at me when you said honorable.
I don't know.
I know I'm not half these things, man. You should kick me
not
out.
what I
You should kick me.
No,
out.
That's not what I'm saying. Respectable and honorable. What is that? What is that? Chad, what is it?
Do it, Chad.
As pastors, I mean, we're people that are proclaiming a message, and like if we're not respectable, if we don't live a life that somebody would look at and say, that there's an honorable person or somebody who lives a life even to some extent worthy of emulation, like the message gets lost in that, and so like we said, like this is kind of a daunting list, and certainly perfection isn't the goal, but that we would live a life that people could look at, and if they have respect for the way that we live, they're going to have respect, hopefully, for the things that we have to say.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Very respectable. Let's see.
I got one.
Dude, where did I get honorable from? It says hospitable.
I see respectable. And then hospitable.
Yeah.
So I think you saw the H with the respectable
Right.
and kind of did your own
That's
thing.
not a very respectable thing to do, to
No.
just rewrite scripture.
Not trustworthy.
It's a Floridian thing to do.
Floridian.
That is.
Wow. Hospitable. Yeah, I think. Yeah, hospitable. That's an interesting one, kind of. Like it's interesting because it's not one I would like think to be in there necessarily, but essentially like caring of other people, right?
Yeah, because I think what comes to our mind has to do with our home and opening our home and making people meals and giving them a blankie. And it's just to serve, though. It just means that you are about serving others, whether it's in your home or not in your home.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere, I can't remember where, but like this
Welcoming.
word hospitable has in mind like specifically to a stranger.
Yeah.
Like it's easy for us to be hospitable with one another and invite one another into our homes, but this is more in view of like the stranger among you.
So a welcoming
Yeah.
of a stranger. Yeah.
And I think like as a real life example, I think of our buddy Jeremy up in Madras. They have a value in their church that if somebody new comes to church, that somebody will invite them to lunch that day. And sometimes people don't always take them up on that invitation, but just like they have this view or value of being hospitable to the stranger and saying, "Hey, come into my home and let me share a meal with you."
Right. So it goes beyond an offering of your name and a handshake.
Right.
It's like how can we actually like solidify, this interaction right now. Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, hi, welcome to the door. There's donuts in the room over there.
Yeah. Bathrooms are there. Coffee's there.
Offering boxes there and there. Welcome to the door. Grab a t-shirt. All right. I don't know where it's coming from.
I
Next.
think you just about spit water when you said that.
Next. Able to
Close.
teach, which is, of course, like interesting. It's sort of famous because it's unique on this list as being not just the character of someone, right? Because most of these, like, interestingly, the qualifications aren't a bunch of things you're able to do, right? Or
Right, they're not skills.
Skills, yeah.
Right.
Whereas this one is an ability,
Right.
which is interesting.
And
Able
it doesn't just mean, and obviously if we look back at like Acts chapter 6, we see that that's the primary job of elders, right? Is that they're given to prayer and to the word of God. But able to teach doesn't just mean that like it's someone with a great personality or that's a good public speaker.
Right.
But if you go to Titus's list, like this is where he ends his list and continues on because they had a bunch of false teachers there. And so this has to do with actually handling the word of God faithfully. Like you do a good job with protecting the intention of God in his scripture. Like that's what your life is. That's what you make your business being. And again, if you go to Titus, you see that clearly. Why, when he unpacks that there, he's like, because you guys got a bunch of people around you that are like blowing this, and this is of utmost importance that you protect the word, Titus. So
Yeah, I think I'm rightly dividing the word and not just being super educated, right?
Correct.
But even able to like communicate that
Yeah.
with other people. It doesn't mean you have to be like, a TED Talk level
Right.
of like
well, there's super educated people, super smart people,
Yeah.
like scholarly people
Yeah.
that are just wrong about things in the word, that
Right.
just
Yeah.
view it wrong and interpret things wrong. Like you can't go
or
by
even
that.
struggle to teach. I mean, there's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
That's a good one. And I would say even, sometimes in the past I've thought able to teach, and I think of like preaching, right? Like able to preach, but that's not only thing that's in view here.
No, there's more. I mean, even he goes into that and other areas of the letter to Timothy as his job as a pastor / overseer, a minister of the Word of God, that he needs to be a good evangelist too. And like he goes into different aspects of what it is to actually handle the Word and be a minister of the Word. So, and if you read the rest of Timothy, then you'll get all those, kind of what this means here, what it encapsulates. Did I say
That's
that
right.
Nailed it. Not a drunkard. What's a drunkard? I had it, dude. Let me say something first, because it's just word association. In college, I was going to school to go into ministry, and I had many friends going into ministry, and they're just getting like hammered all the time, And I said to him one day, so I says to him, what's up? You guys are getting drunk all the time. The Bible's pretty clear about like drunkenness. And my buddy says to me, hey, it doesn't say don't get drunk. It says don't be a drunkard.
Okay,
and I was just like,
so a drunkard is someone that gets drunk. I'll just say, someone that gets drunk.
Pretty self-explanatory.
I'll never forget that.
And not to mention all the other verses in the NT, the New Testament that say do not get drunk.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's a stretch, but
Don't be a
same thing. I mean,
drunkard.
I don't know a lot of pastors that do that personally. I'm sure there are. I don't personally know any that are drunkards or get drunk, but
Yeah.
I know a lot of Christians
Yeah.
Right.
that get drunk like regularly. And it's just like,
It's a lifestyle.
where's this thinking come from?
Right. Well, and that's like, and some of these other things are kind of like, it's just not respectable. They're kind of tying it back to an earlier one. That's just not a respectable way to live.
Not to mention that it
Debauchery.
does away with sober-mindedness too.
Right.
All right. Not violent, but gentle. Not quarrelsome. This has kind of been in the news. Like we're getting more instances of pastors being, I want to say dethroned, but that sounds wrong. Defrocked.
Defrocked.
Defrocked is like a great word. Anyway, of basically being
I'm not gonna
asked
make
to
fun of
resign, or no, I'm not going to make fun of that. Anyway, okay, we're seeing more and more instances in the news of people being asked to resign or being like let go from ministry because of anger or even violence towards people, which is kind of interesting. I don't really remember that
What
ever
about
from
that
the
dude
past.
who does those baptisms like that? Would he be considered violent?
If you haven't Googled WWE baptisms, now's your chance after the show.
We may start implementing that.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that guy.
But the quarrelsome thing is like, that one's more subtle because it can very much easily be passed off for or masqueraded as standing up for the truth,
Right.
with like passion. But I think like these days we're seeing a lot of that with people that are just actually being jerks. They're actually creating fights. They're actually
Right.
being contentious, and they're doing it in the name of Jesus. Oh, this is allowed because I'm right and you're not. And I think that doesn't work here.
Yeah. Well, I think of even just, a couple of celebrity pastors that come to mind, names you would know if we threw them out there. But, one guy reportedly, took out a hit on a family member. Like a well-known
is
pastor.
that real?
Yeah,
Was
yes,
that the Babylon Bee? Or
No,
this-
that actually happened.
Yeah, it's real.
And then the other day, another well-known celebrity pastor had a family in his church surveilled, 24-hour-a-day surveillance.
That's rad.
Just guys that have some anger that they're letting out in ways that aren't good.
I have
I'd love
thought
to be
about
at that
doing that,
meeting.
but I never came close to doing it. Just so you know, I've never done it. We're not creepy. We're not that creepy, but
I'd love to be at that meeting. Tom, I'm going to need you to surveil this family. Got it, boss. I'm on it.
Right.
Who do I report to? Only me. Yeah. Yeah, gentle, not quarrelsome, which is kind of like not loving to argue, you know?
mhm.
Not a lover of money.
Also, a lot of other big names in
Yeah.
the last couple of years that have been defrocked for loving money. Not just because they had rad shoes on, Thomas,
That is a thing.
Preachers and sneakers.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the limit on shoes before you get defrocked?
What do you think? What do
How
you think's
expensive?
reasonable?
I don't know. I don't buy a lot of shoes.
Hmm.
Right above what I would be at, which is about $100. So, sorry. Depends if they're high tops.
Those were $129, and it's
Yeah.
the most expensive pair of shoes I've ever bought in my whole life.
Just tell everybody they were a gift. That's everybody. They were a gift from God.
Well, even both of these celebrity pastors
Just
I,
like
that
my
I
jet.
have in mind, like part of what they're being accused of too is like one guy went on African safari on the church dime.
That's
And
rad.
then
Wasn't it a hunt?
somehow it was ministry to go on this African safari, and this guy's
Absolutely.
using church's money for their own gain, and again, it's not respectable.
What do you think about like pastors who like make a bunch of money off the books? And they're like, oh, I'm rich because of the books, not because I'm a pastor.
Well, what a lot of them do is a lot of them will write the books, and they'll say that they've done this so that they don't need to take money from the church anymore. Like it's kind of like a
Yeah.
noble thing.
Yeah.
And maybe for some of them it is a noble thing where they're like, that's how they self-sustain. It's like, I'm not going to pull stuff from the church anymore.
Yeah.
That has better places it can go. And which is a good thing if that's really what it's meant for. And that's kind of his tent making at that point. His ministerial tent making is, I'm going to go ahead and support myself through my writings. But not everybody does, though. There's a lot of people,
Right.
like this book thing has become extremely a trendy way of number one, becoming celebritized and popular, and number two, making a lot of money if you get the right book.
There's an argument out there now that I have read recently about whose intellectual property are these books. Like if a pastor writes a book under the employ of a church, is that the church's intellectual property? Therefore, the church would be entitled to the whatever money that generates. Just an interesting argument to think about that, just in our modern times.
Sure.
But I think of one celebrity pastor that has written a lot of books, and all of his books go to fund the ministry at his church. Like he doesn't take a dime from his books. John Piper, a guy that we reference once in a while, and that's just a super respectable thing. Like he's probably entitled to draw some income from that.
He could make a lot. I mean,
And
his
he
books
chooses
are
not to.
super popular.
And he's written a ton of books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And every single dime of royalties that come from his books go to support the college that I think he founded, but through his church, and that's just a super respectable way to live.
It's cool because like I feel like in the land of celebrity pastors and very like wealthy pastors, like even though it's not required of John Piper to do that, but
Right.
it is a great witness to do stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
I think there is a place for that.
I think
Which
Rick
Peter
Warren does a lot of that
obviously
too.
does.
And I know that's a whole different name that, probably shouldn't be uttered in our circles, but like I think he does some really respectable stuff when it comes to what he does with all of his book money and whatnot.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's good. I mean, we see the precedent of like Paul when he was working, right? Like regularly he would go to people and he would end up, tent making or whatever to make money himself, just so there could be no like criticism of him or the gospel.
Right.
he
Being
was
above
sharing.
reproach.
Yeah, like he did
Yeah.
something, even though he had a right to reap a harvest,
Yep.
he would say, you know what, I'm not even going to do that because it was almost seemed like proud in a good way. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not even going to let you like besmirch, if you will, this ministry or this gospel, especially in
We'll
the
come back
face
to that
of
word
like,
later.
especially, in the face of like, philosophizers and such, Greek people who were like out to make money, which was nothing new then and is still a thing now. So, not a lover of money.
It's interesting that the era of kind of watch blogging, we were talking about that before the broadcast, that you can go online and find these watch bloggers that have taken it upon themselves to dig into these like some celebrity pastors in particular and their financials and
Yeah.
where they draw their income, and it's just an interesting thing to read about.
Yeah, I think it's also like it is possible to be like a lover of money even without a lot of money.
Right.
Like I even in my own heart,
That's a
I
good
think
point.
about that sometimes. Like I don't have a ton of money, but it's like I'm just as able to like love money
Yeah,
sure.
as someone who has a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that is something to watch out for.
Yeah, we're all prone to be materialistic or just covetous, which is looking at something and saying, "I wish I had that." You know what I mean? And
Especially as a pastor in a small church, you think about, like, if I say this thing, it's going to cause some people to leave, right? And that might affect my ability
That's a
to
good
draw an
point.
income
Yeah.
from the church.
but I think again in the context that we're talking about qualifications for the people that are going to lead a church spiritually, it matters that much more that these people, a spiritual leader of a church, is not looking through the lens of money.
Right.
Because if he's a lover of money, that's going to dictate the decisions he makes. It's going to dictate the way he leads the church.
Absolutely.
It's going to dictate so many things, which is part of our frustration today with what we see with a lot of times just the corporate model that's been implemented in the church, is because that corporate model is basically ran and dictated through the lens of finances first, which means that you are making decisions, even godly churches on certain levels, that probably shouldn't be the first decision to make.
Definitely.
So I think it kind of has that direct connection to it too, as to why it's so dangerous. So it makes us do stupid things.
Every once in a while, I'll get someone that comes up to me like after church or whatever and says something like in the Pine, I'll use an example, like, oh man, it'd be cool if we could like get a big building someday and like have our own like space, because we worship in the community center. And it's like, I'm not like I get why people think that. Like, I don't look at them and go, oh, that's terrible. I just think like, you know what? Like, it wouldn't be hard. Like, if we wanted to aspire, if that was our aspiration, to have big salaries and to have big buildings and stuff, we could do it. It's not difficult.
Yep.
Like it's not tricky. So, the path is well trodden. We could blow up, milk it for 10 years, and then go start another church.
Yeah, there's formulas to apply.
Right. So I think, anyway, that's a good point. Like, love of money can also influence ministry big time.
Yep.
Are we going to make it through the list?
I don't know. What, do we have a time limit?
We're at 51 minutes. Almost 50.
You're just trying to get out of it before we get to manage his own house.
Actually, I would rather stop now.
Ooh,
Ouch.
I'm sorry.
You just besmirched me, dude.
That is the one that almost kept me from planting this church 10 years ago. Is the one you're about to read.
Jeez, should we? Okay. He must manage his own household well with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church?
Just white it out.
So this is one of those ones, kind of like, what was it here?
Woman.
Husband and one wife. Yeah, kind of. There's sort of a spectrum or a range of how people understand this. Some would have a very strong view, which would be like their children need to be like perfect.
Right.
Well,
if you read it in Timothy, it's easy to have a softer view of it. If you read it in Titus, it's easy to have a harder view of it, like a stronger view of it. And that's why there's a contention, is just because of the way that he words it in each of those. So here it makes it look like this is about just how you parent, how you control. It doesn't mean that it has nothing to do with the faith of your child or the belief of your child. It's just when they behave, are you responding properly to their behavior, right?
Yeah.
And we can all get down with that, okay?
Right.
And there are those pastors out there that, that sometimes their kids are the worst ones. They're the ones that are never corrected. They're never, you know what I mean? And that dude is probably off, disqualified. But if you go to Titus, it uses stronger language, like kids that are faithful. And that word actually translates to believing. And you're going, all right, what in the world do I do? How does a dad make sure that his kids are believers? It's not even something that we have control over, our Bibles tell us. So, like, is that what Timothy's saying? So it's one that's definitely wrestled with. But I almost, until I understood the conclusion I came to, which is this has more to do with how I respond. And the key phrase to me is, if you can't respond well in your home, how can you respond to things well in the church? So it's how I am actually reacting and parenting rather than what they have or don't have. That's the conclusion I came to. So
I think Tony Sprando's watching the live stream, and then he's also texting me if I'm going to be in church on Sunday, which is like, what's up, Tony?
What are you doing?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, like, it's difficult, right? Because how do you control children? Like, I couldn't be controlled. So, like, how
you spank them till they believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
That's what it's
even
saying.
the culture then, like, even the culture and, like, the strong family back then, like, I feel like parents had more, like, ability maybe to be like, this is what we believe, or even, like, you can't just, like, dictate someone's faith, but, like, even just, I don't know, it's just such a different society.
Right. Well, again, if you've got people that are doing the hard thing, which is expected in a church, when you have a congregation, you're going to have corrections that need to be made, and it's on you. Like if you're the leader, the pastor, the elder, the overseer, that's part of what you're overseeing. Is that you're the one who has to set the pace with these things and meet these things head on. And if your solution with everything is to turn a blind eye to it and just wait for it to go away because you don't like confrontation or you know what I mean? Which is what some parents do in their home even. They just don't have the energy to put into parenting their kids, and so they don't. And that doesn't fly if you're a leader in the church. It's just gonna make a wreck out of the congregation.
And the other extreme is to be just heavy-handed with everything.
Well, of course. Which I think is why it said what it said before this, even of
to be gentle.
violent and be gentle, not quarrelsome, because that guy can come in and be creating most of the drama going on in the congregation. So, yep.
We'll wrap it
Did
up.
we solve it?
Talk a little bit about cohesion. Sometimes I think of pastors or people who are. Here's a question for you: is it possible that you are called to be a pastor and yet not be called to pastor a specific congregation?
You missed two.
I know. How late do we want to go, dude?
Are you scared of that
I'm
next
not.
one?
Oh my gosh. Are you daring me, dude?
I'm just kidding.
Don't be a new convert.
No,
I feel
no,
like
go
that's
back to cohesion.
self-explanatory.
I'm just messing around.
Explanatory. Prioritary. What did I say? Is it possible to be called to be a pastor but not be called to pastor a specific congregation? Does that make sense?
Mm-mm.
I think I get what you're saying. I mean, because you're talking about it in the context of cohesiveness, and so just because someone's called to be a pastor, does that mean they're called to be a pastor anywhere?
Yes.
Okay.
Right? Like you could look at, like there are certain denominations that I wouldn't line up with, and I would say like, okay, well, like God's called me to be a pastor, but probably not in maybe some of these denominations over here, and would maybe gravitate conversely to kind of more other denominations. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Yeah.
Like there's got to be a theological alignment, and even as I think about like as we've merged with the door, as Calvary Chapel La Pine, like there's an alignment that happened that allowed for that to be the case that with another group of guys might not have happened.
Yeah.
So this is going to sound really cheap, but I'm going to say it. I'm going to give it a shot.
Okay.
I think it's possible, like if you're qualified, you're called by God, and you're gifted in these ways, I believe that you are a pastor, which makes you able to do the things God needs you to do anywhere, if it revolves around prayer and the Word of God.
Okay.
But I do believe that our actual effectiveness can vary depending on where we're at. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like I believe that I could go to Community Bible Church and pastor there if I had to. Like I could shepherd those people to the best of my ability and what God has put into me, right, as far as a pastor. But it wouldn't be as effective probably as it would in a context like the door. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think about this a lot, like, because we talk about calling as like the calling someone feels on their life to like be a pastor, but sometimes, like, I'm trying to use a hypothetical / not hypothetical example. And it's kind of tough to build one, but like, it's like I feel that calling, right? And it's been in other places, in other places I've lived, in other congregations, people have like affirmed that calling, right? I could have come to the door and like maybe like I don't know how to put this. There's like scenarios where like I just wouldn't be needed here, or like I wouldn't. You know what I mean? Like it wouldn't be affirmed, not because I'm disqualified. Sure. It just wouldn't be like necessary here, which like I don't even know what kind of question this is. It's just like a weird hypothetical I think of sometimes.
I can't imagine a scenario where you're not needed, Jordan.
I can.
Oh man.
Can we leave?
Yeah. Let's end with that confusion and despair. How did we
That
get
was
here?
that was good.
All
You
right.
got us into some weeds, dude, and we got right out of them.
Good. I have random questions, but I'll save them.
These are the bonus questions.
Yeah. we'll
Like, just
save
give me
them.
like a teaser. At
Yeah.
one of them.
I think that was one of them actually.
Hypothetical, non-hypothetical.
Yeah, I was like, what if? Who's gonna pray us out of here? Oh, well, I wanted to talk about what a pastor's job is and isn't, but maybe next time.
That might be
I
a
didn't
subject
really
for
get into
another
that. That would
table
be a
talk.
good one. Like,
We can devote a
what-
full table talk.
Are you gonna do part
Can you
two?
raise my children
Part
for
two
me?
next week?
Should I?
You didn't even finish the list, bro. I
Yeah.
feel like you kind of
Well, I think
ripping
we-
some people off.
We have a
Oh,
guest
my.
coming next week, so we have to push that out a couple of
Who's the
weeks.
guest?
Is that next week?
That's next week.
He's actually gonna be here.
Yeah.
Glenn?
Secret
Yeah.
guest?
Nice.
You should do a part two with your questions.
All right.
'Cause
I'll
that was
come up
good.
with more too.
And what's cool about this is that we're going to start talking about leadership and overseers and elders in Peter on Sundays with the congregation too. Like it's going to go into some of that. So this seems to be kind of a theme right now.
What if someone was born female but identifies as male?
Okay.
Can they be?
Chad, pray us out.
Yeah, Lord, thanks for today.
Marcy, pray us out.
God, we're thankful for today and thankful for the discussion that we could have. And just pray that it would be beneficial to people and that whoever might be watching would have a better idea of what the Bible has to say about who pastors are and what they do. More than that, just would pray for us as pastors that you would help us, just as we're men that fall short of the standards that we just read. And so we need your help to do the things that you've called us to do. And so help us to lead the church well, help us to love people and to shepherd people well as we endeavor just to point people back to Christ in all that we do. We ask it in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, brother. You did good.
Yeah.
Yep. I miss Brent. Can we get him back in?
Thanks for
there?
joining us.
I wonder if Brent's still with us or if he dropped off.
He's probably gone.
And we're gonna finish now.